Mr. Begley and members of the board, we do have two items for board discussion this evening. Our first is in regard to our current bus fleet. This time, I will turn it over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Begley, members of the board, the topic for discussion this evening is an update of our current bus fleet, in particular the buses that are driven on a daily basis. Let me begin by communicating that our general education buses drive an average of approximately 77 miles a day, and our special education buses drive an approximate amount of 120 miles a day. We do estimate that a bus can be operational for daily use for up to 10 to 12 years. And I would like to highlight that our bus mechanic partner, Beers Garage, I must commend them on their management of the fleet, which allows us to push that age to 12 years and sometimes beyond. I want to take a moment here to talk about our routing history over the past few years. As you can see, we've gone from 61 in school year 22-23, all the way down to 47 in 24-25. I would like to highlight that part of the reason of those reductions in routes is an increased ridership calculation. About 3 years ago, they started building buses with an extra row. That allowed us to add a few students per route in our calculation. And in addition to that, we increased our number in our calculation, knowing that not 100% of those that we route will ride. Also, our new routing software, which we implemented over the summer, has been helpful in special tools that it has to help us be more efficient in our routing process. Number of buses needed. Currently, daily we need 47 general education routes and 10 special education routes. Therefore, we need a bus each for those. On our bus parking lot, I would like to highlight we do keep 10 general education buses and 3 special ed buses for spares. That is just in case if something breaks down or if very rarely we have an accident, that we are able to pull down into that spare fleet as needed. So they are not used on a daily basis, and those are our older buses, but our best ones that we have. So our total number of buses needed are 70 at this current year. Here, I'm just highlighting the age of the current daily fleet, so I'm not getting into the spare buses with these numbers, and I tried to group them up to make it easier I didn't want to have too many columns here. So the 2 years I'd like to highlight is 17 and 19 with the 15 and 1, and then 14 to 16, 18 and 4. There is a little bit of a bubble in that 4-year period of a lot of buses that we did purchase, some of which are on a lease. So later on, as we talk about a purchasing plan, the goal is trying to spread that out over multi-years to try and help alleviate that. Here we're just showing the same data in a graph to again show that some of our older buses from 17 on, we have quite a few, and again I want to focus on those last 2 bars, in particular the 14 and 16 again, that is our focus over the next 2 years with this replacement plan. Our proposed replacement plan for this year. Our 2025 estimated cost per bus, which is this year, is $140,000 for a general education bus and $146,000 for a special ed. We are looking at purchasing 8 general ed buses and 1 special ed bus. This will be an increase of 1 route for special education next year. And our estimated purchase total is $1.266. I highlight this and also talking about our goals currently and moving forward. The goal will be is that we'll have annual discussions with the board. So talk through this plan annually. We will continue to look for ways to be more efficient without compromising safety, and continue our current standard of maintenance with our fleet with, again, Beers Garage. That is vitally important. a couple years ago when we had our audit, and a gentleman by the name of Doug Palmer came down from Columbus. He highlighted that the condition of our fleet, especially at the older age, was impressive. So he complimented us a great deal on that. So at this point in time, this is our plan that we are presenting for this year. I know that number of over 1.2 million is quite a considerable number. I can tell you that moving forward, the estimation of increase on the price of a bus for 2026 is 10% more, and in 2027, we've been advised to budget a 14% increase. So, with that said.
If I could, just give a little bit of background in terms of going back several years. And I guess, first of all, clarify, and if it didn't help everyone understand, so the overwhelming majority of our buses were purchased between 2014 to 16. That's the largest number, which obviously is, 10 years ago, 2014. The next largest number is 17 to 19. I know that for at least several of the board members, you've been present. We've had some conversation in the past about plans for purchasing buses. And at some point, I don't know the exact year, the recommendation was to purchase 7 buses a year to avoid being in a situation where, 14 to 16, we had to replace 18 buses, right? So we had that plan in place. However, with the financial crunch, right off the bat, instead of doing 7 purchases a year, we did 5. And we did that for a few years. And then because of finances, we said we would reduce that to 3 a year. And when we did that, we said at some day, we will find ourselves in a spot where we will need to make up for that reduction in purchase. And we're here based on the life expectancy of our buses. So I think that's important to think back in time. And again, I think several of you were present for some of those conversations. We knew that we would get here. Mr. Perry, Mrs. Lane, and I have had several meetings over the past month and talked about the best step, moving forward in discussions with the board. And while Lance briefly mentioned 2026 and 2027, all things considered financially, we think it's in the best interest of the district just to talk about this year. Planting the seed, knowing that, hey, there will be a need in the future, but all things considered financially, let's just talk about a 1-year plan. And that previous slide talked about this will be an annual discussion with the board, but let's see where we are 1 year from now. So that's why we just narrowing our focus to 1 year for financial reasons. So
I just have a clarification.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
We used to have 5, which is correct, but then we went down to 2. You said 3. We went down to 2 per year. So right now, in the forecast, we are planning for 2 purchases of 2 buses each year of the forecast. So just to clarify that point, there was 1 year where we were able to purchase an additional bus because we received school bus purchase funds. So we were able to use that grant money to add another bus to our fleet. So just to clarify that point.
Questions?
Yeah, is there anything wrong with the older buses, mileage-wise, or just the upkeep? Because I know Kenny Wright does a great job over at Brewers.
Yeah, when we look at keeping a bus on the daily, it's not just miles. So we do have some that are daily that have more miles than other in the spares, but we definitely take the recommendation of Kenny of which one, because in addition to that, I'm not highlighting that we're going to be selling some buses, because we do want to get them off the lot and get them off our insurance, et cetera. And again, we work with Kenny on which ones are in need of more repairs, long-term, short-term. A couple we have that are going to be leaving our lot. They need about He estimates about $10,000 in repairs to be able to put them back on the road and pass inspection, so that's just not, obviously, it's time for that to go. But we work hand in hand with them on that.
So what's the alternative if you lease?
If we lease is definitely an option. Obviously, it's the percentage, the loan itself. The last number that I heard was 559. And if my math was correct, on the 8-1 lease, if we're going out like 8 years, it was pretty considerable across that. In addition to that, with additional questions, I asked Mr. Palmer about that as well. He said they're starting to see a lot of banks are starting to do a payoff penalty because the idea might be, what if we look into, okay, we can do an 8-year lease, but maybe we just pay it off in 4 or something of that nature, like keep our options open, but with the penalty, that's definitely something that we'd have to take into consideration if we were going to consider that option.
I think this also shows to what you mentioned, Mr. Smith and Ms. Lane, the transparency over the last few years, how you've been cognizant of the expenditures and looking towards the future of what we might need. And it eventually will catch up to us, like you mentioned, but we've talked about that, we've known about it, we plan for it, we adjust for it. The buses are safe for the children, and that's the most priority. The lease option, as was mentioned, that's something it sounds like you looked into. I'm going to put more homework on to you, but I wouldn't mind seeing the numbers minus the prepayment, because obviously I'm in banking, I understand that. But are there numbers that would show 8 years out what that would be in comparison to buying 12 buses or whatever that might be? And it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but sometime over the next month. Just curious of what that number might be, just to be financially astute to what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
we may need to go for, may need to vote for a levy, and I want to make sure we're cognizant and understanding of all the areas of the expenditures. So
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
But this is great, again, the transparency again to the community, to the board members and to the whole school district of what we're doing. And I think this is great. I mean, nobody likes to spend the money on this stuff, but again, it's for the kids, and that is the priority for the students. So, and as you mentioned, the safety and the measurement of spending 10 grand a year versus when's it time to retire that. And I guess my other question, which I thought about but forgot, now it came back again. When we sell an old bus, what do we get out of those? What is there? I know there's not an exact number, but is there an ish?
It's a good question. Previously, we traded them in,
Okay.
so that number is kind of worked into our
So no
price with
balance
them.
to it, okay.
But now we're looking at selling them on our own to try and maximize that. I would estimate maybe 5,000 a bus,
Okay.
maybe.
Not much.
I
I've
think
got-
trade-in used to run $2,000 to $3,000 also.
Correct.
Yeah, not much.
Not much. Maybe we should sell them and make Bengals party buses out of them or something.
Now, when I say that, I can tell you we have one bus that will be required to be towed off the lot. So I don't see us getting 5 grand for that one.
Yeah. Pay to take it away.
Just thank you,
All right, thank you, Mr. Perry.
thank you.
Mr. Perry, the route history, one of the early slides, 61, 56 down to 47. So when we lower the routes through efficiencies in software programming and other things, obviously that decreases the burden on the bus fleet itself, right?
That's correct. It reduces the number of buses and drivers needed.
Yeah, well, that's tremendous. I mean, where would we be if we had another 14, 15 routes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you.
That being said, my assumption though, that when we decrease the routes, yes, we need less buses and drivers, but then we're putting a little bit more mileage on the buses we do have.
That's
So they're
correct.
still covering the same amount of territory, just less people running around and less buses going around. So we're spreading a little bit more onto the fleet we do have.
That's correct.
I want to thank you for putting this together. You know, it's never an easy subject when we're talking about numbers that have more than 3 digits, in my opinion. So I appreciate your work and diligence on this. I agree with Scott. I'd love to see the loan and numbers and just to see the difference. I completely trust that you've done that and you're making the better suggestion, but just as though we have transparency to show that we are being mindful of the numbers overall and not just making assumptions. I had one question, and I lost it. I apologize. If I remember, I'll email you.
Sounds good, thank you.
If I could, and maybe your question will come back while I
Maybe.
ask Mr. Pearson. Would you mind just talking to the board, big picture in terms of process here, in terms of what you intend to do next, and then, the questions about the financial pieces and the options, when that would come back up for discussion? Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, moving forward, because this is a new process for us, I may engage, or I'd like to engage with Doug to assist in that as a consultant, being the first time making sure we're writing the correct spec to get the bus that we need and that we desire. We would put that out, so it would be a normal bid process where we would advertise. We would also send it out to any manufacturers or dealerships in the area to help with that. So that takes weeks to write that process, start it, put it out there. Then because we would control the bid, we would be able to put a timeline of expectation of delivery, which is something I haven't touched on, but it has been a challenge, especially coming out of COVID. But it seems as though that number is getting much better. So it would be nice to be able to set an expectation of when we receive the bus, because there are items we have to do to it before we put it out on a route. So we would be able to control that. Part of the reason why we are talking about this in September is because that process and that lead time to order. I would like to be able to have this all created and come back to you maybe as early as December with this is what has come back from the bids. If we're able to do that before, of course we will. But that would be the goal, to kind of leave us enough, I'm hoping to leave us enough time to where we would like to have our buses on the lot by June 1.
Yeah.
To be specific. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's a great timeline.
Yeah, okay.
And that answers my question, which was going to be what we were hoping to have these by the 2025, 2026 school year.
That's correct.
Just keep in mind, interest rates are going to change.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
By the time we get those bids,
Yeah.
so any
Yeah.
financial information that's provided would just be an example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I've got a question, this is thinking outside the box. Have we ever thought about advertising on the buses to help with this cost?
I have not pursued that. I actually, I don't know of anybody who has done that, but it's definitely something, if there's some actual monetary value, that it's definitely something we can look into.
Okay.
Anything else? Great, thank you, Mr. Perry.
No, thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
All right, our next item for board discussion, performance contract for the incoming interim school treasurer. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hustle.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Bagley, members of the board. Here to discuss the performance contract for our interim school treasurer, Amy Lee. Pending your approval, Ms. Lee does not officially begin or start her position until October 1st, and to ensure that she's able to properly be trained by Mrs. Lane before she retires, a short performance contract up to 40 hours is needed. This will ensure a smooth transition for Ms. Lee and the treasurer's department. During this time, Ms. Lee will be able to shadow Mrs. Lane, receive a training in different roles, responsibilities, and current online platforms needed to be successful in that position.
Thank you.